Ethan Cooper and Marissa Hale, never meant to become the center of a nightmare. But the moment their quiet suburban street fell silent, their lives, they thought they knew, began to unravel in ways no one could have imagined. Marlon Vexley was the kind of person who lived on the edge of the world. His job as a travel journalist took him to remote mountains, forgotten islands, and abandoned towns that most people only read about. His stories were filled with risk and adventure, but also with a sense of calm confidence that made readers trust him instantly. He had been doing this work for years, and nothing had ever frightened him enough to stop. That was why, when news of his disappearance reached the public, it spread like wildfire. People could not believe that someone so experienced, so familiar with danger, could simply vanish without a clue. Marlon had checked into a quiet seaside lodge in northern Verdun during the first week of winter. The place was small, with only 7 rooms, and it was known for the kind of isolation writers often sought. The lodge faced the ocean, and during a storm, waves slammed against the rocks with a force that echoed through the walls. The owner remembered Marlon arriving with a single backpack and a camera bag. He had been polite, calm, and unusually focused, as if working on something important. The owner thought nothing of it, because strange behavior from travelers was normal for that region. The trouble began when Marlon failed to check out. The cleaning staff knocked repeatedly, but received no response. When the owner unlocked the door, he found the room untouched. The bed looked perfectly made, the windows were closed, and there was no sign of struggle. Marlon's passport and wallet were on the desk, neatly placed in a way that almost looked intentional. His phone, however, was gone, and so was his camera bag. The strange part was the notebook on the bedside table. It was blank from start to finish, except for one sentence written on the last page. "I finally found it." That sentence raised questions no one could answer. Detective Rafe Calder arrived at the lodge the same afternoon. He was experienced, calm, and known for solving cases that others considered impossible. The first thing he checked was the lodge's security system. The cameras showed Marlon leaving the building at exactly 3:12 a.m. He walked alone across the quiet yard toward the dark shoreline. There was no sign of hesitation or fear in his steps. Calder noticed how straight Marlon's posture was, as if he knew exactly where he was going. What confused Calder even more was the complete lack of movement behind him. No shadow, no second figure, no approaching person. It looked like Marlon had chosen to walk into the night on his own. Hours later, the tide washed up a notebook that belonged to Marlon. The cover was damaged by salt water, but the pages inside were mostly intact. That same sentence appeared again at the bottom of a torn sheet, written in the same hurried handwriting. Calder wondered if Marlon had been trying to leave a message. The more he studied it, the more it felt like a warning disguised as a discovery. The media got hold of the story within a day. News channels ran constant segments about the missing journalist. Comment sections overflowed with theories, some claiming Marlon found a hidden place, others insisting he uncovered evidence of something dangerous. Amateur investigators online began digging into Marlon's older articles, looking for clues or coded messages. The public fascination grew by the minute, turning the case into a global obsession. Calder continued exploring the shoreline. He found footprints in the sand leading toward the rocks, but the tide had washed away anything beyond that. A local fisherman mentioned hearing a strange sound around the same time Marlon vanished, something like a distant, metallic hum, but he could not describe it clearly, and Calder could not link it to anything. Nothing about the case made sense. Every clue led to another question. As night fell again, Calder stood near the ocean, replaying the footage in his mind. Why would a man walk calmly into darkness without taking any belongings? Why leave his identification behind, but take his camera and phone? Most importantly, what had he finally found? The air around him felt colder than usual, and the waves crashed harder against the rocks, as if warning him to step back. Calder knew one thing for certain. Marlon Vexley had not simply disappeared. Something visible or hidden had pulled him away from the world, and whatever it was, It had left no trace behind days after Marlon Vexley vanished. Investigators found something that pushed the case into darker territory. A digital message had been sent from Marlon's encrypted account to a woman named Elira Sorn. The timestamp showed it was delivered only hours before he walked out of the lodge. The message had no subject line and no readable content. It appeared as a blank email, yet the system showed that a file had been attached, and then instantly deleted. That discovery led Detective Rafe Calder to Elira's apartment. Hundreds of miles away from the seaside town where Marlon was last seen, Elira Sorn was known for her intelligence and precision. She worked as a data analyst for a firm that handled digital security for large companies. Her colleagues described her as quiet, focused, and distant. For neighbors hardly ever saw her. She lived alone, in a small apartment filled with stacks of documents, computer parts, and locked cabinets. Elira denied knowing Marlon, claiming she had no connection to him. But Calder found her reaction to controlled, almost practiced, as if she had prepared for questions that had not yet been asked. When investigators examined Elira's computer, they discovered a troubling pattern. She had accessed restricted data linked to Marlon's projects days before he disappeared. There were maps of obscure locations Marlon had visited in the past, coded symbols matching his notes, and fragments of articles he never published. The files were incomplete, as if she had deleted portions hastily. The gaps felt intentional, like someone trying to hide a story by erasing just enough to confuse the viewer. Calder dug deeper into Elira's background. She had changed jobs 7 times in 8 years, always moving to cities where major cyber incidents occurred shortly after her arrival. She left each job suddenly, citing personal reasons. Many of her former employers had reported small data breaches that were never fully solved. None of these incidents pointed directly at her, but the trail she left behind felt too unusual to ignore. When Calder searched her apartment more thoroughly, he found a concealed compartment behind a false panel in her desk. Inside was a hard drive wrapped in black fabric. It held hundreds of images of abandoned buildings, broken roads, strange structures buried in forests, and close-up shots of symbols etched into stone. In the middle of those folders was a picture that froze Calder in place. A photograph of Marlon Vexley standing alone in a forest clearing, taken only hours before his disappearance. The background was identical to one of the locations Marlon had visited years earlier, yet the timestamp was recent. Even more disturbing was the fact that Elira owned no camera capable of taking a photo at that resolution. She had no travel history matching the location. It was as if the image had appeared from nowhere. Calder could not understand how Elira had obtained it or what it meant. Elira became the center of the investigation, but her behavior added more confusion. She seemed terrified, constantly checking the windows and glancing at the corners of her room, as if expecting someone to appear. When she spoke, her words were sharp, but her hands trembled. Calder noticed that she avoided discussing anything related to Marlon's final days. Every time he mentioned the note found in Marlon's room, her expression tightened as though she recognized it. The most unsettling discovery came when forensics technicians analyzed her computer logs. They found evidence that Elira had attempted to erase her identity months earlier. Several government databases showed failed attempts to remove her records. Someone had blocked the deletion midway, leaving her information half intact. This suggested she was part of something bigger, either trying to escape a secret group or being forced to remain visible for reasons the investigators could not yet understand. Calder began to suspect that Marlon's encrypted message wasn't just a coincidence. It might have been a warning, a plea for help, or an attempt to transfer something too dangerous to keep. Whatever Marlon had discovered, Elira knew pieces of it, even if she refused to admit it. As media attention intensified, online theories grew wilder. Some believed Elira was responsible for Marlon's disappearance. Others claimed she was the next target. But Calder could see a different pattern forming. Elira wasn't the architect of the mystery. She was trapped in it. Her movements, her deleted files, and her fear painted the picture of someone running from an unseen network, Every clue pointed to an invisible force, tying Marlon and Elira together long before the investigation even began. Calder felt the weight of something approaching, something quietly orchestrated. With each new discovery, he sensed that he was stepping into a world where every digital footprint, every erased file, and every missing person was part of a single, silent system, and Elira Sorn, whether she liked it or not, was caught exactly at the center of it. The deeper Detective Rafe Calder searched, the stranger the investigation became. Every lead connected to another name he had never seen before. And one of those names appeared more often than the rest. Jonas Mirell. He was a security technician, working at a high-level data facility known for handling sensitive government archives. Jonas had no criminal record, no complaints from employers, and nothing in his personal history that raised suspicion. Yet, his digital fingerprints were everywhere on files related to Marlon Vexley, on systems tied to Elira Sorn, and on surveillance networks that stretched across multiple cities. Calder obtained a warrant to review Jonas's access logs. What he found looked impossible. On the night Marlon disappeared, Jonas had used clearance codes reserved only for top-tier officials. He accessed a restricted database containing confidential travel patterns, encrypted messages, and identity maps. This was the kind of information that no security technician should ever have permission to view. The system flagged his login attempt, but instead of triggering an alarm, the alert had been manually disabled. Someone inside the facility had protected Jonas from being detected. Or Jonas had manipulated the system in ways that looked almost superhuman. Calder decided to visit the facility personally. The building stood at the edge of the industrial district, shaped like a concrete block with no windows and a single guarded entrance. Inside, the air was cold and heavy, with the scent of metal. Rows of servers hummed in the background, creating a low vibration that made the floor feel slightly alive. Jonas worked in a small room, marked by a red access panel. His workstation was cluttered with multiple screens, wires, and external drives. But what caught Calder's attention was a second door behind Jonas's desk, one not listed on the facility's blueprints. When the investigators opened the door, they discovered a hidden room containing outdated servers, disconnected cameras, and a maze of labeled cables. The dust on the floor showed footprints moving in and out frequently. Despite its abandoned appearance, the servers were powered and running. Some displayed feeds from traffic cameras, drones, and building entrances. Others held archives of people's movements, all carefully timestamped. A single folder labeled Project Vexley sat on a central console. The files inside documented Marlon's travel history, his unpublished research notes, and even private messages he had never sent. Someone had mapped Marlon's entire life in chilling detail. Calder found something even more disturbing. A second folder, labeled Soren_A19, contained similar tracking data for Elira Sorn. It listed her job changes, her attempts to erase herself from databases, and her movements across cities. But there was a third folder, with a name Calder did not recognize, someone whose identity had been wiped clean. It was clear this network didn't just observe people, it controlled them, chose them, erased them, or followed them until they disappeared. When questioned, Jonas was oddly calm. He insisted he was simply doing routine system checks, but his explanation contradicted every piece of evidence. His heart rate didn't change, his breathing stayed steady, and his posture remained perfectly still, almost mechanical. It felt less like a man lying, and more like a man who had rehearsed every word until the truth no longer existed inside him. Calder sensed that Jonas was connected to something far more complex than simple cybercrime. As officers continued searching the hidden room, they found a single video file with a timestamp, only a few hours before Marlon vanished. It showed Marlon standing near the shoreline where he was last seen, but the footage was taken from a distance, as if someone had been watching him secretly. In the corner of the video was a faint reflection, someone's silhouette, hooded and unidentifiable. Jonas denied any knowledge of the recording. Yet the camera ID matched one of the illegal surveillance devices found in the hidden room. Calder left the facility with more questions than answers. Jonas Mirell was not just a technician. He was part of an underground structure that collected information with precision and purpose. The fact that both Marlon and Elira had been tracked long before either knew they were in danger suggested a network that operated silently and without boundaries. The investigation no longer felt like a missing person case. It felt like stepping into a web stretched across entire cities. Each thread connected to someone who had no idea they were being followed. And Jonas Mirell, with his emotionless calm and access to secrets he shouldn't have had, was one of the spiders sitting quietly in the center of it. Drina Kale approached every case with a cold precision that made people uneasy. As the forensic specialist assigned to assist Calder, she took a particular interest in Marlon Vexley's notebook, the one recovered from the shoreline. On the surface, it seemed nearly empty, just like the copy found in his lodge room, both carrying the same single line about finally finding something. But Drina understood that information could be hidden in layers most people never noticed. She brought the notebook to her lab, dimmed the lights, and scanned each page under ultraviolet filters. When the invisible ink emerged, the room grew completely silent. Beneath the surface of the blank pages lay road names, symbols, coordinates, and short phrases written in quick, sharp strokes. Some lines appeared repeated, faded, and overwritten, as though Marlon had changed his mind multiple times. The coordinates pointed to a remote section of cliffs, far from the lodge, an area almost impossible to reach without specialized gear. Drina suspected Marlon had been there shortly before he disappeared. She shared her findings with Calder, and the two traveled to the site. The closer they came to the cliffs, the more the landscape changed. The trees grew sparse, the wind colder, and the path more unstable. It didn't look like a place where a journalist seeking adventure would casually wander. It felt more like a location meant to be hidden. When they reached the coordinates, they found a ruined research outpost, half buried between stone and soil. The building looked abandoned for years, yet the signs of recent activity were impossible to ignore. Boot prints marked the dirt, and a window had been wiped clean from the inside. Drina and Calder entered the structure carefully. Inside, broken shelves lay scattered, charred scraps of documents covered the floor, and wires hung from the ceiling where machines once operated. The smell of burnt plastic still lingered, suggesting the destruction had taken place recently. Someone had gone through great effort to erase everything. Drina noticed a locker bent in a way no ordinary tool could achieve. She pried it open and found a small tracking device, identical to those Jonas Mirell had access to in his facility. The connection between Jonas's hidden surveillance hub and this abandoned outpost became impossible to ignore. Back at the lab, Drina performed tests on the device. It held traces of two different sets of fingerprints. One belonged to Elira Sorn. The other set didn't match any records in national or international databases. It was as though the second person didn't exist at all. That discovery disturbed everyone involved. There were only two possibilities. The unidentified individual had undergone complete identity erasure, or their existence was never recorded in the first place. Drina studied the invisible ink phrases again, and one stood out. It read, "They found me first." This confirmed that Marlon had not been alone in his discoveries. He had been tracked long before he realized it, possibly by the same hidden network connected to Jonas. Another note read, "Not safe to return." This suggested that Marlon had intended to leave the area completely, but was forced to change plans. Drina returned to the outpost alone later that week to double-check the scene. Something about the atmosphere haunted her. She noticed marks on the walls that looked like symbols, similar to those in the files found in Elira's hidden compartment. This deepened the mystery. If Elira had these symbols and the outpost had them too, then she and Marlon had both encountered the same hidden force. The thought unsettled Drina. She took photos and samples, but the sense of being watched never left her during the entire visit. As she examined everything back in the lab, she realized a disturbing possibility. The network Jonas appeared to be part of didn't just observe. It orchestrated events so carefully that even professionals like herself struggled to piece together its movements. The ruined outpost, the hidden surveillance, the erased fingerprints, the encoded messages all pointed toward a system designed to operate without detection. Drina knew the investigation had crossed into something far beyond traditional crime. This was not about one missing journalist or one frightened analyst. This was about a quiet structure, moving behind society, bending records, controlling information, and erasing anyone who discovered too much. And Drina feared they were getting dangerously close to the center of it. The weight of the case now pressed down on her more than ever. She understood that uncovering the truth wouldn't just expose a criminal operation. It would dismantle an entire hidden network. But she also knew that getting too close to that truth came with consequences. The same forces that had swallowed Marlon Vexley could easily swallow her. Next, Detective Rafe Calder had followed countless trails in his career, but none left him with the chilling sense that the ground beneath him was shifting with every step. The encrypted package that arrived at his office early one morning was the strongest proof of that sensation. It held a single memory card, wrapped in a sheet of plain white paper, with no markings, stamps, or fingerprints. The delivery method itself made no sense. No one had approached the building. No cameras showed any visitors, and yet the package sat on his desk, as if it had materialized out of thin air. Calder inserted the card into his computer without alerting anyone. The screen flickered twice before a single video file appeared. As soon as he opened it, Marlon Vexley's image filled the screen. The footage was unsteady, as if recorded in haste. Marlon looked pale and exhausted. Behind him, the trees swayed violently, though there was no wind audible. The shadows among those trees seemed to shift unnaturally, creating shapes that disappeared the instant one tried to focus on them. Marlon's expression carried the weight of someone who had seen something he was never supposed to witness. He spoke directly to the camera with a controlled urgency. From his movements alone, Calder could tell that Marlon believed his time was limited. He explained that he had uncovered a hidden structure and network, operating silently across multiple countries. It manipulated digital records, erased identities, and monitored people long before they became aware they were being watched. According to Marlon, Elira Sorn had once been part of this organization. She had tried to escape, deleting traces of herself and hiding in routine jobs, but the network had followed her relentlessly. Jonas Mirell, on the other hand, had been pulled into the system through subtle manipulation and forced dependency. His role had been to monitor Elira and Marlon, ensuring they remained within reach. Marlon's explanation grew more fragmented as the video continued. He said, "The organization punished anyone who tried to expose it. They staged disappearances, manipulated surveillance evidence, and created false identities to replace the real ones they erased." He revealed he had learned too much, and the network had arrived at the outpost before he could escape. He said he sent Elira a partial copy of his findings, hoping she would recognize the danger and flee. The moment that followed changed everything for Calder. Marlon led the camera toward the shoreline. In the distance stood a figure waiting for him. At first, the image was blurry, but as Marlon approached, the figure's face came into focus. Calder froze, watching his own image appear on the screen. It was unmistakable: his posture, his facial structure, even the scar near his left temple. According to the timestamp, this meeting occurred at the exact time he was miles away, speaking with lodge staff. Every piece of evidence from that night confirmed his presence elsewhere. Yet the figure on the screen extended a hand toward Marlon. The image was too clear to be a coincidence. Calder felt his pulse pound as he replayed the moment again and again. It wasn't him, but it was designed to look exactly like him. Someone had created a perfect replica, digital or physical, for the sole purpose of misleading Marlon, or perhaps convincing him to follow willingly. The realization hit Calder with terrifying clarity. The network had the capability to build identities, replace faces, and fabricate reality. The last seconds of the footage were chaotic. A bright flash swallowed the screen, and Marlon vanished from the frame. The audio distorted until it became nothing but static. When the video ended, Calder sat in silence, unable to move. The evidence in front of him implied a level of control and manipulation far beyond anything law enforcement could confront. If the network could replicate him, it could do the same to anyone. It could rewrite events, create fake suspects, erase real ones, and steer investigations into dead ends without leaving a trace. The official report later claimed the case lacked evidence for further investigation. Files were quietly sealed, footage disappeared from the system, and the names connected to the case faded from public awareness. Calder noticed the pattern and recognized the signature. The network had stepped in and buried everything. Marlon Vexley was never found. Elira Sorn vanished without a trace. Jonas Mirell's employment records were erased soon after. Drina Kale requested reassignment and avoided all questions. Calder carried the truth silently, knowing that any attempt to expose it would result in his own disappearance. The world moved on, unaware that a quiet system continued to operate behind it. The case remained unsolved, not because the answers were unreachable, but because someone had decided they were not meant to be found. And that was why it became known as the case that truly shocked the world.